Well, good afternoon. We'll throw a little party and a lot of people show up. I appreciate you being here. On behalf of the college, the Board of Trustees, the faculty, staff, and most importantly, our students, we want to thank you for coming out today to our forum, which is put on by our Student Senate. An opportunity to hear a newsmaker and hear about what's really going on in Washington, D.C. So without further ado, I want to introduce the President of the Student Senate, Matt Govero, who will introduce the Senator and our program today. So welcome, Matt, will you?
How's everyone doing today? Good. Senator Claire McCaskill is a daughter of Missouri, and she has the resume to show it. Born in Rolla, Claire spent her early years in Lebanon and Columbia. After graduating from Hickman High School in Columbia, Claire stayed in town, getting her undergraduate degree in political science and a law degree. At the University of Missouri, she worked as a waitress to help put herself through college and law school. After law school, Claire worked as the Jackson County prosecutor and was later elected as Missouri auditor. Since becoming the first elected female senator from Missouri, she has combined her experiences as prosecutor and auditor to become one of the best-known senators of the government reform and accountability. Earning praises from Republicans and Democrats alike, Claire has helped to reshape the Senate, tackling issues of accountability, national security, and consumer protection, among many others. Today, Claire is here at Jeffco during the most important Senate campaign in the nation. She is here to discuss an issue that is important to me and many of you in the room: protecting student loans and access to education. In the Senate, Claire has been a strong supporter of legislation to make attending college affordable through preserving low-interest student loans and Pell Grant funding for students who may otherwise be unable to afford to pursue a college education. And for that, I as a student thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Missouri Senator, a senator on our side, Claire McCaskill.
Thank you. It is great to be here this afternoon, and I am here to talk about student loans and student grants. As was indicated in that great introduction, I went through school with the help of many hours waiting tables and student loans. I wouldn't have ever been able to become a lawyer without federally backed student loans. And if you look across this state right now, there are, well, you would be surprised maybe to learn how many students we have in college with student loans or grants. Let me ask this audience, how many of you are attending school right now with the help of a federally backed student loan or a grant? Well, that's very similar to, and how many of you are also working jobs? Yeah, see, this is what I see. I see so many young people who are, and people going back to school, retraining for another job, that are not just going to school, they're also holding down a job, and many of them are also trying to take care of a family. So it is really important that we have the availability of student loans and Pell Grants. Over 300,000 Missouri students are attending school this year as a result of Pell Grants or student loans, federally backed student loans. In fact, it's about half and half of that number. Around 150,000 have Pell Grants and around 150,000 have student loans. So I was shocked when I heard that my opponent said that student loans backed by the federal government are the same as the third degree of cancer of socialism. And that he believes the federal government needs to get entirely out of the education business, which means there would be no more Pell Grants and no more federally backed student loans. And I think that sometimes saying get the federal government out of things sounds good until you really think it through. And so I think it's important to think this one through. First of all, what is it about our country that the rest of the world admires? First, it's our democracy and our freedoms and our open system of government and our rule of law. But beyond the open structure of our government and the freedoms that each individual has, they really admire our standard of living. You see, in every single country in the world, there are rich people. And in every single country in the world, there are poor people. But there are a whole lot of countries where there's nothing in between. That all you have are the very rich and the very poor. In America, we have always had this vibrant and healthy, robust middle class. And if there is any ticket to the middle class, guaranteed ticket to the middle class, it's a college education. That is the ticket of admission. Now, sometimes you can obtain a good economic support for your family without a college education. But most of the time, people that are firmly established in the middle class have had some form of higher education. So if you really think about this, if we decided to pull the rug out from underneath 300,000 Missouri students in terms of their ability to go to college, who would be left in college? The kids that belong to wealthy families. Now, there'd be a few rock star athletes that would get athletic scholarships, and there would be a few really, really accomplished academic students that could get some scholarships. But it would slam the door shut on the vast majority of those 300,000 students. And what does that do to the middle class? Where is our middle class under that scenario? And isn't that exactly what we're fighting to hold on to, is making sure that we don't end up in the country with just the haves and the have-nots, that we still have a middle class where someone can buy a second car, maybe put a little addition on the house, own a house, maybe buy a bass boat, maybe take a vacation once every 1 or 2 years, maybe put a little money aside to help a grandchild with college, or maybe to help out a child that is trying to get together a down payment for a house of their own. Those are the kinds of things that our middle class represents to the rest of the world. It's why so many people envy our country, because we've figured this out. So to me, this issue about the availability of a college education is much bigger than one individual and whether or not they can get to college. The other thing that would happen, obviously, in just wealthy people going to school, is that you think about these kids that can't get to college, how would they get there? Congressman Aiken has said, well, we need to get the federal government out and get it back in the private sector. What that means, of course, is that banks would make the decision as to whether or not to loan money to young people to go to college. Now, I've had 3 17-year-olds. I would not loan money to any of them. These are not the most credit-worthy people in the world, 17-year-olds. Are any of you 17? Okay, well, you're not, even if you're 18, you're not credit-worthy. And what these high school graduates would walk into a bank and say, look, I've got no marketable skills, I have no job, I have no money, and I have nobody to sign this loan. Won't you give me $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to go to college? And of course the bank would say no. So I think the consequences of this kind of policy is something that if most Missourians think through, they're going to reject. If there's anything we should be doing, and keep in mind that backing these student loans doesn't mean that it's costing the government money, because the vast majority of the student loans are repaid. I repaid mine. It took years. I will admit it took years, but I repaid every dime with a little bit of interest. So I was a good bet for the federal government to back, and so are the vast majority of young people who take out these loans. So I think investing in higher education is very important. The other side of this that people forget about is what would it do to institutions like this college? What would happen at this college if all of the kids that are attending here couldn't attend anymore because they didn't have an availability of a loan or a grant? What would it mean to communities like Kirksville and Cape Girardeau and Maryville and Springfield, and communities that have so much economic activity that circles around the institutions of higher learning? How many professors would be laid off? How many staff would be laid off? How many spaces would no longer be necessary And what does it mean in terms of an available workforce? I mean, we now know that one of our problems, I was shocked when I traveled around on our manufacturing tour, because I figured every manufacturing facility I went to, the problem would be that they had so many people applying for jobs and not enough jobs. I was shocked to find out how many of the manufacturing facilities I visited in Missouri were looking for workers. The problem was the workers they were looking for had to have technical skills. Manufacturing is no longer a rote activity. It's running a computer. It's accessing technology in terms of the automation of so much of manufacturing. And so many of these manufacturing facilities were working with colleges such as this to try to integrate the jobs that they needed to fill with the training that was ongoing, so someone could go straight from a community college straight into a job that needed some kind of technical skill in order to do it. Those are some of the creative things that are going on right now. And many of them are going on because of the investment that the federal government is making. And it's not the federal government that's making that investment. You're making that investment with your tax dollars. And I think most Missourians would say, you know, I think that is a wise investment of our tax dollars. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some things we spend tax dollars on that aren't so wise. And I'm busy on that. I've worked very hard to bring down wasteful contracting and eliminate some of the programs that are payrolls without a purpose, put a cap on federal spending, and get our debt down, because we need to do that for all of you young people and for your kids. But I don't think we can sacrifice getting our young people educated in the war on the budget. I think that is a casualty that we can't afford to have. So that's why I'm traveling around to so many college campuses this week. I think this is my 8th or 9th college campus I've been on. And I've tried to go to all different types of colleges and universities on this tour. So I want to make sure I leave time now to get questions. Are any of you here for class? Are any of you going to get credit for being here? Good. Did they make you come? No? Oh, good. I feel better. I thought, you poor things. You're being stuffed in this room at 2:45 on a Friday afternoon, and that's not fair to you. So I'm glad you're here, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this topic or any other topic that is that deals with the federal government, my job as a U.S. Senator, or political campaigns, or this political campaign. Pretend like I'm your professor and you're going to get graded on class participation. Yeah.
Last time that we saw you here, I pulled my daughter out of her last hour of high school to see you again. We saw you in 2009 at the field house during the healthcare forum, and watched how you handled with compassion and caring questions on Medicare, Medicaid, the whole healthcare plan, and then watched how national news covered it, and it was as if we were even at the same meeting. Heard President Clinton the other night talk about he'd never seen hate such as in this election and this time. How would you advise us as citizens to navigate that climate of hate so we all work together toward positive impact?
You know, it's really a good question, and I wish I had a brilliant answer for you. I'll tell you what I see. The way our media is fragmented now, when I was growing up, my parents used to make us watch the evening news. We had to either watch Huntley and Brinkley or Walter Cronkite. Now, many of you aren't old enough to remember who those people even are, but some of you are. And then we would talk about it at the dinner table. Today, some of my friends that are very, very liberal, they like to go on MSNBC and watch that every night. And you know what they think when they watch that? I am right. I am so right. I am righteous. I am so right. And then my friends on the right, they go watch Sean Hannity and Fox News. And you know what they say? I am right. I am so right. I am righteous. I am so right. And what they're both getting is spin on both sides. Meanwhile, the people in the middle that actually decide elections in Missouri, they're watching Dancing with the Stars. They're not watching either one of those channels. And the people who are making all the noise in our political system are the people at the far ends. The people that were on national news from that town hall, they were at one end. Most of the people at that town hall weren't that way, as you know. Most of the people were there because they wanted to learn and they were interested and they had good questions, and it really was, I think, a positive exchange of the way government should work. But the media, of course, clipped out the fight. You know, they clipped out the part that was confrontational. And because they're trying to get eyes and ears. So if it doesn't make you mad, or if it doesn't scare you, they're just really not that interested in writing about it or putting it on TV. They want to put stuff on TV that makes you mad or that scares you. And so meanwhile, everybody's watching and going, well, gosh, that makes me mad and that scares me. I'm just really mad. And then the people in the middle that aren't paying close attention, unfortunately, too many times, they're just watching 30-second commercials that are distorted and many times not completely truthful. So I guess my best advice, and when I give high school graduation speeches and college graduation speeches, I ask the young people to work at getting facts. Don't go to one source. It is just as wrong to watch MSNBC all the time as it is to watch Fox. It is just as wrong to read the New York Times all the time as it is to read just the Wall Street Journal. Both of them have much different perspectives about many political issues. Getting information from as many sources as possible. And then all of us that hold office, we need to listen carefully so that we're not dictated, our actions are not dictated by the loudest, but rather by the details of the public policy that's in front of us. Nobody calls me on the phone in Washington and says, I want you to compromise. One end will call and say, I can't believe you're not voting for this. And the other one will call, I can't believe you're not voting for this. Nobody is calling and saying, well, can't you guys figure out how you can agree and get together? And that's really what most people want. They want that middle to work. So they rank us from 1 to 100 in the Senate. Most liberal to most conservative. You're looking at number 50. I am very proud of being number 50. Because it means that I am not always going along with my party, because obviously I'm not voting along with all the ones that are more liberal than me all the time, and I'm not going along with Republicans all the time, and that's why I'm in the middle. I kind of try to pull in the best from both sides and figure out if we can't find a solution. So I think more important than party label is whether or not somebody is proud to be a moderate. Are you proud to be somebody who thinks compromise is the hallmark of our democracy, or do you think compromise is a dirty word? If voters would look more for those kinds of candidates, I think our government would work better. That's just my take on it. It was a long answer, but it's a complicated question. I apologize. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, that's the one thing I wanted to address. I have never, and certainly my parents have never seen a Congress that is more gridlocked than this Congress has been. And I don't quite understand it, and I think a lot of people are getting turned off by voting because they don't think anything's going to happen. Or they're voting just one party in because then they know something might happen. So I wanted to know what exactly is going on in Washington that is causing this tremendous, hostility and gridlock. If you look back in the 80s, you see Democrat-controlled Congress that may not have liked Reagan, but they went along with, there was compromise there between the two. So I'm not quite understanding why 10 years, like it seems like now, and
It really hasn't been 10, because honestly, when I first got there, the first 2 years, there was a significant number of both Democrats and Republicans that worked together. The last 4 years have been difficult, and I think part of that was politics. When you have a candidate of one party whose main reason for running was, I'm going to get along with everyone, I'm going to try to work with everyone, well, then all the other party had to do is leave the building and he fails. Right? Yeah. Because if your whole narrative of getting elected is we're going to work together and change the politics in Washington, all one side has to do is say, I'm not playing, and it's over. And the other problem here, too, is not just that, in fairness, but we've got not just a president of one party and a Congress of a different party. We've got a split Congress. And if you go back in history and look for the times where one house has been controlled by one party and the other house controlled by the other, it's never pretty. Because the people who control the Senate feel like they were elected on certain platforms, which they were, and they feel an obligation to be true to what they campaigned on. The people in the House were elected on a much different platform, and they feel the need to be true to that. So it's natural that we're not holding hands and singing Kumbaya, because the people send a really mixed message. The people of this country sent a very mixed message. And by the way, Jefferson County did. Jefferson County is a great example of a county that goes back and forth. I can cite you elections, and I know this really well. This is an important county in any election because there's a lot of votes here. But I can show you election to election where this county will swing back and forth by as much as 6 or 7 percentage points between the two parties. So Jefferson County in one election say, go fix health care, and the next election I'm going to kick you out of office because you fixed health care. You know what I'm saying? So it's really one of those things that these independent voters have a tendency to say, which I understand, what have you done for me lately? And if they don't think it's moving as fast one way, they say, well, let's try the other side. And that is also kind of contributing to the problem. There is more compromise going on than they're reporting, though. For example, right now, I'm working with no less than 5 or 6 Republicans on bipartisan legislation. Doesn't get a lot of attention, but Senator Portman and I and Senator DeMint and I are working on tariff legislation to help our manufacturers. I'm working on a bill with Senator Marco Rubio on making sure that the UN doesn't control the internet. I've worked with a number of Republicans. I'm working with Senator Kelly Ayotte, a Republican from New Hampshire, on a bill to clean up some of the abuses at the GSA, which is a federal agency that was wasting a lot of money. So that's going on, but what the news wants to cover is the food fight. So you see the food fight, and it's really frustrating, and you don't see the grinding out of the work that actually is getting done. But I wouldn't give up hope. Remember, there was a time when a member of the House got so mad at a member of the Senate, he walked down the hall from the House to the floor of the Senate, pulled the senator physically off the floor of the Senate, and beat him into a coma with his cane. We're not doing that. So it has been worse. Believe me, it has been worse. I mean, they were having drawdowns with guns in the parking lot at one point in time. It wasn't even a parking lot then. It was a place you tied up your horse. So, it's not as bad as it's been other points in our history, and I do think once this election is over, it will get better because I do believe the country's going to moderate. I think it swung really hard to the extreme in 2010, and I think it's going to moderate and come back to the middle, and that will give us the right message to move forward. Yes, sir?
I know, when you were talking about they pulled off the whole federal government out of the student education department. It was shut the doors. Well, I know, all the jobs out there requiring more employment for trades and stuff like that, like law enforcement and everything else. But it doesn't. A lot of people don't show that with kids with disabilities or in this college, they have high school students coming in. That would affect them too, and when it raises tuition and everything for the colleges, if they pull it off because they don't have the funding for it, would that raise the tuition and make it even worse for high school students in general too?
Well, obviously the universities and colleges would have to greatly decrease the capacity they have, which means they would have to shrink the size of the physical plant. They wouldn't need as many buildings, they wouldn't need as many dorms. So that would have an economic impact, and you'd have to still have a certain number of professors, particularly if you were offering a number of different specialties, and you might not have enough student loan to cover that overhead. So it could conceivably make tuition go up in a significant way if that occurred. I mean, obviously, there would be schools, I guess, would try to keep tuition down because the only people who could afford to go there would be the people who could actually pay for it because it'd be very difficult for them to get loans. But it would have a dramatic impact, no question about it. Yes?
I was so excited whenever you decided to take questions, so I wrote mine down to make sure I say it right. I mean, over the last few years, it seems like the Republicans have been really effective at steering our national conversation toward the right. And I mean, for example, we had a debate about if we'd raise the debt ceiling to pay our bills. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Do you think it's fair to say that the Democrats have moved right? I mean, our positions on cap and trade and the individual mandate are identical to those of the Republican Party only a few years ago. And do you think it's politically safe for a party to actually represent those on the left who want to tax our biggest polluters steeply, have truly universal health care, and a federal amendment to repeal Citizens United?
Wow, what a good question. Liz, if you are you going to school here? I bet you get good grades. I knew it. See, I knew it. First of all, you have to understand that I think for the Senate, because we represent entire states, the representation of the states has a lot to do with the state they represent. For example, bright blue places like New York and California are they're the ones way at the top of that list I talked about, because they represent a population that feels very strongly that we should be going hard and farther to the left. And then there are senators that represent states that are bright red, like Oklahoma and Wyoming and Utah, where you have a really strong population that feels very much that we need to go further and further to the right. And then you have states that are kind of in between. I mean, Missouri has been represented by a Democrat and Republican for most of the last 40 years, one of each. And those are the states where you're likely to get moderates, like me, who I think what I'm doing is not representing my party, but representing the people that I work for. I'm trying to reflect what I think is my state. That we're not real hot, we're not real cold, we want people to have some common sense, not have regulations that are stupid, but have some regulations, and find that place in the middle. You are right that some of the things the Republicans are railing against were their ideas in the first place. And I certainly agree with the part of your question about Citizens United. And for those of you who don't know what Citizens United is, it is the worst Supreme Court decision in our lifetime. Because what it did is it said that our elections could conceivably go to the highest bidder anonymously. They said corporations are people, and corporations can give as much money as they want to give to try to elect a candidate. And they don't even have to say who they are. So of the $15 million in advertising that's been spent against me on television, the vast majority of that we have no idea who paid for it. Some masters of the universe somewhere behind some closed door said, well, we're going to come into Missouri and write hundreds of millions of dollars of checks for all over the country, and we're going to buy this election. And now, because of the Citizens United case, it's perfectly legal. Now, we have tried to change it. The Supreme Court, when they made the decision, said that Congress has the right to define this decision by requiring disclosure. So we said, let's take a baby step here. We're not going to say you can't give unlimited money. Let's just require that you disclose it. Because I think it matters to you who pays for an ad. If there's an ad up there that's saying I'm Satan on a horse, I think you want to know whether that's a big oil company that's paying for that. Because if it's a big oil company that's paying for it, you might think, well, maybe she's not Satan on a horse. If the big oil companies are saying that. And so we put in a bill called Disclose that just would have required disclosures. And the Republicans blocked it because they know the vast majority that's going to be spent in this election anonymously is going to be on their side of the ledger. So hopefully when this election is over, people are so sick of these ads, and you're not seeing them like they are in swing states. Places like Ohio and Florida, trust me, they are so sick of these ads because they're seeing it day after day after day, and it's all at the presidential level, and it's a lot of it. I'm hoping that people will be so frustrated that they will put pressure on their elected representatives so that we can begin to clean it up. Because if we don't, you know how it's going to get cleaned up? There's going to be a scandal. Because you can't have that kind of money washing around in the system. If you combine power, politics, and anonymous money, trust me, there's going to be a bad ending. There's going to be somebody come in here with a bunch of money, buying some elections, and it's going to come out that there was bad stuff going on, that people were putting money in their pockets, and the greed will take over, and we'll have a scandal. But hopefully we can clean it up before there is a big scandal. That was a very good question.
So we have time for one or two more.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Could you elaborate on the tariff bill that you're working on, and also I'd like to know well, go ahead and just do that.
Well, I've done several things in this area. One, I have testified a number of times in front of the International Trade Commission on Chinese cheating. China dumps. They're supposed to pay tariffs, and they don't. And the way they cheat is we go to the ITC, we get a special duty imposed because China is unfairly subsidizing a product. In other words, the Chinese government is subsidizing the company to the extent that it makes it very unfair for our manufacturers to compete. So we put a special duty on it. Well, the way they cheat is they route say it's coat hangers. They route the coat hangers through Taiwan, label the package Taiwan, send it in, and it's really China, but we haven't caught them because they've mislabeled the product and brought it in. So I've got a bunch of stuff on that to require bonds to be set so that when we catch these cheats, what happens now when we catch them, we can't find anybody to hold accountable because they have these agents that are in the middle that have post office boxes. So we need the middlemen on these trade deals to be financially liable for the duties.
Would you say that that's one of the things that defeated Solyndra, gave Solyndra a rough time? Because they had China had an advantage on that?
I think that was part of it, that China was subsidizing the solar panel industry to such an extent it made it really difficult. The other tariff bill I have with Senator Portman is right now you can get special tariffs done if you, for example, you want to get relief because there's no other place you can get a product but one place. And you don't want that to have a tariff because it's the only place you can get that product for your manufacturing processes. Those are now almost like earmarks, the way they're done in Congress. The members of Congress kind of like it because the lobbyists for those businesses come and say, hey, get me a special tariff. And then that sets up a fundraising relationship. So I'm trying to clean that up to make it transparent so that the companies can go straight to the ITC and get them without having to rent a congressman to get it. I mean, that's not fair because it's not, it's not like the congressman's putting money in his pocket, but it is way too laden with lobbyists and congressmen doing this because it's something they can, quote, deliver to a constituent. So we're trying to clean up that system to make it less, because I helped, was one of the key fighters of earmarks and got those cleaned up. And we're trying to do the same thing with these special tariff bills. Yes?
I want to change the subject to like education. I think that's important. I'm going for education to be a teacher, and there's so many teachers and professors that's being laid off all around the country. Do you think there's going to be a progress like in for teaching like 20 years from now or something?
Well, first of all, we need teachers. And if I were going to be somebody getting a degree to be a teacher, I'd look carefully at what I was going to specialize in teaching. Because there are many school districts, when I did my education tour, for example, there are places in Missouri that can't find a science teacher, that can't find a math teacher. So if I were going into it right now, I would look carefully and see where are there teaching vacancies and that are not being filled because there's not enough people trained in that area, and I'd focus on that. Missouri is a low tax state. We don't fund K through 12 robustly. I'm hoping that changes someday, but I'm not optimistic in the short term. The federal government has tried, President Obama has tried to pass a bill that would allow more. The stimulus gave a whole lot of help to school districts. 1/3 of the stimulus just went straight to the state government, and they passed that along to the school systems. So a whole lot of teachers' jobs were saved by the stimulus. Nobody knows that because nobody in Jeff City wants to admit it, but it's true. And now there was an attempt by the president to help again with firefighters, teachers, police officers, because all these state and local governments are still struggling. That has been blocked by the Republicans because they don't want to see any more money spent to help state or local governments. So I don't have a good answer for you other than the fact that we always need good teachers, and that's not going to change. And I certainly, if you think you're going to love teaching and you're going to be creative in the classroom and you see that as something that's going to make you feel happy getting out of bed every day, I would never discourage you from going for it, because good teachers are going to find jobs and going to keep jobs. Yes?
This one's been so long. So a lot of Republicans, they signed contracts that say that they would never ever raise taxes no matter what. Like a Nobel Prize winning economist who tells them that it has to be done, and they still wouldn't do it. Do you think that it's ever right to sign a contract saying that you definitely won't do something?
Well, I would sign a contract that I would never commit a felony.
I mean, like,
I think the pledge thing is dumb. I think, here's my contract I have, that I'm going to do the very best I can for the people I work for by really working at understanding the legislation, understanding the policy ramifications, trying to bring a lot of hard work to that effort and some intellect to that effort, being able to always articulate why I voted for something or why I voted against it. Beyond that contract, to give my very best, to do my best job at representing my state and bring real work ethic to it, I think to make some kind of blanket promise like that shortchanges our government, because it makes it hard to find those compromises. If you got a lot of people that have signed pledges, I will never do this, I will never do that, then how do we get to that place where it is a compromise? And I think a compromise is going to be necessary, particularly as we reduce our spending on our deficit and reduce our debt long term. So I think you're going to see a lot of Republicans break that pledge. Not all of them, but a lot of them will, because we're going to have to get to a compromise place. Anybody who hasn't asked one that wants to? Yes, sir.
You mentioned you were working with one senator on keeping the UN from becoming a regulatory agency for the internet. Could you tell us a little more about that?
We were just Senator Marco Rubio and I were both. I'm kind of like my friend over here. I'm kind of a tech gal. My iPad is everywhere, and I use technology a lot in my work. I find it incredibly helpful, and so I know what the internet means to our economy. And as a sovereign nation, I want to make sure that we are not getting into a situation where the UN has regulatory authority over the internet, because I think in the long run, it could really hamper a country like ours that is at the cutting edge of a lot of the technology that is driving economic activity through the net. And so it's just something we want to express legislatively that we strongly object to the notion that the internet would become some kind of international arbiter over the internet. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. Well, listen, you guys have had great questions. I really appreciate you all spending some time here today. It means a lot to me that you came and that you sat through this. I hope that I answered your questions, and if any of you are interested, any of you ever want to run for office someday? Okay, good. I got one taker down here. Anybody else? Okay, well, I will warn you, when I was your age, you know what I was doing? I was working on campaigns in college, and look what happened. So anybody who's interested, I would sure encourage you to sign up and volunteer. We serve a lot of cold pizza to people who volunteer, and we need lots of help, particularly in Jefferson County, because we want to knock on a lot of doors and make a lot of phone calls. So anyone who's interested in helping out, we'd love to have you. You just go to ClaireMcCaskill.com and we can get you signed up, and you'd be surprised how much enjoyment you might get out of it. And thank you very much for coming today. I appreciate being with you. Thank you.